Gareth set foot on the cold stone courtyard of Ravenshallow Fortress as twilight descended like a deep purple curtain. He shivered. Not from fear, but from the cold that had already begun biting into his flesh, even while still standing outdoors. The stone walls, 4 meters thick, rose like mountain cliffs, promising protection from enemies. But Gareth didn't know they would also become his frozen prison. "You, the new recruit," a raspy voice behind him, made Gareth startle and turn around. A gray-haired man with hunched shoulders, wearing worn armor, stood at the main entrance. "I'm Marcus, head cook, and also the one who'll show you how not to freeze to death on your first night." Gareth bowed his head in greeting. "I'm Gareth, sir, sent here to serve as guard for Lady Catherine." Marcus chuckled hoarsely. "Guard? Fine. But before you think about protecting anyone else, you'd better learn to protect yourself first." The old man pointed to the large oak gate. "Step inside. But remember, from now until tomorrow morning, your real battle begins." When the heavy gate closed behind them, Gareth felt the change immediately. The air inside the fortress was thicker, colder, as if the stone walls were sucking all the warmth from his body. His breath suddenly turned into wisps of white mist. This was strange. He was still indoors. Surprised yet, Marcus stepped forward, his voice echoing in the towering corridor. These walls were built to stop arrows and swords, not to keep warmth in. They absorb heat like a sponge absorbs water. Once the sun sets, the temperature inside drops as fast as outside. Gareth shuddered. He could feel the cold creeping through every pore, clinging to his bones, making his joints stiffen. "How do people survive in here? That's exactly what I'm going to teach you." Marcus led the way through the long corridors. "But first, you need to understand one thing here. The greatest enemy isn't the attackers from outside. It's the cold. It doesn't sleep, doesn't rest, and it's always trying to kill you." They passed through many empty rooms, each colder than the last. Gareth noticed water droplets condensing on the stone walls and dripping to the floor with a steady tink. Tink sound. Some spots on the walls had even begun forming thin ice. "Last winter," Marcus said, his voice dropping, "we lost 3 people. Not from war or disease. They simply couldn't fight the cold anymore." Gareth's heart pounded. "They froze to death. You'll understand soon enough." Marcus stopped before a large wooden door. "But first, I'll take you to the only place in this fortress that still has life." The door opened, and Gareth was overwhelmed by a wave of sound and light. The great hall was filled with laughter, conversation, and the sizzling sound of roasting meat. But what drew Gareth's attention most was the enormous fire blazing in the hearth at the end of the room. It was large enough to roast an entire ox, and the dancing flames cast mysterious shadows on the stone walls. "Welcome to the heart of Ravenshollow," Marcus said, his voice full of pride. "This is the only place in this fortress where you can feel warm." Gareth stepped in and immediately felt the difference. Near the fire, the air was warm and comfortable. People sat around long tables, holding mugs of ale, their faces flushed from the heat. But when Gareth looked further, he noticed something strange. Everyone was crowded near the fire. The tables far from the hearth were empty. "First lesson," Marcus whispered in Gareth's ear. "Here, distance from the fire determines life and death. 10 steps from the fire, you're still warm. 20 steps, you start shivering. 30 steps, you can see your own breath." Gareth observed more carefully and saw Marcus was right. Those sitting in front rows comfortably removed their cloaks, while those in back rows still wrapped themselves tightly in warm clothing. In the farthest corners of the great hall, A few servants endured the cold, teeth chattering, simply because there was no space near the fire. "Why not make more hearths?" Gareth asked. Marcus shook his head. "You think we haven't tried? But these walls are thick as fortress walls. All the heat that radiates out gets absorbed into the stone. Even with 10 hearths, they'd only create 10 small circles of warmth." A loud laugh erupted from the group of guards near the fire. They were telling stories, passing hot mugs of ale from hand to hand. Gareth felt a longing to sit with them, to feel the warmth from the flames and the camaraderie. "Come on." Marcus patted Gareth's shoulder. "I'll introduce you to everyone." As they approached the fire, Gareth felt his face beginning to burn hot, but his back remained freezing cold. It was a strange sensation, of his body warm, half cold, as if he were standing between two different worlds. "Everyone, this is Gareth, the new recruit." Marcus introduced. Faces turned toward them, all flushed from fire and ale. "Welcome to the frozen hell." A brown-haired guard laughed heartily. "I'm Bram. Hope you've prepared yourself mentally for the first night." "The first night is always the hardest." Another added. "Most recruits don't sleep at all. They shiver until dawn." Gareth swallowed hard. "That bad? Worse than you imagine." Bram said, his eyes sparkling in the firelight. "But if you survive it, you'll learn the secrets. We've all been through that feeling." The conversation continued, but Gareth noticed everyone constantly glanced toward the fire, as if worried it might go out. Occasionally, someone would stand to add a log, and everyone else would watch that action anxiously. "Fire is our god," Marcus said quietly to Gareth. "It gives us life, and we worship it by never letting it die." Hours passed, and Gareth began to feel sleepy. The warm ale and hot air near the fire made his eyelids heavy. But then he realized something frightening. The number of people in the great hall was gradually decreasing. One by one, they reluctantly stood up, pulled their cloaks tighter, and disappeared into the darkness of the cold corridors. "Time for sleep." Marcus sighed. "The hardest part is about to begin." "Why don't people just sleep here?" Gareth asked. "It's warm near the fire." Marcus smiled sadly. "You think we haven't tried. But fire throws sparks, toxic smoke, and noise. Besides, who would guard the property and protect the fortress if we all slept here?" Now, only a few last people remained by the fire. Some guards had pulled their chairs back to avoid excessive heat, but they still didn't want to leave. Gareth understood that feeling. Leaving the warm firelight to go into corridors cold as death truly required courage. "Marcus," an old guard called from near the fire. "The fire's getting weak. Should we add more wood?" Marcus looked at the fire with worried eyes. "Add 2 more logs. But not too many, we have to conserve wood for the whole winter." Gareth watched as 2 large oak logs were thrown into the fire. The flames leaped higher, creating crackling sounds and making everyone sigh with relief. But he also realized this could only last a few hours. After that, they would have to face the cold once again. "All right, boy." Marcus stood up and patted Gareth's shoulder. "Time I showed you to your sleeping quarters. You need rest to prepare for the challenges ahead." Gareth reluctantly stood up, his eyes still fixed on the flames, as if he could absorb more warmth into his body. When he stepped out of the warm, bright circle, the cold immediately attacked like a wild beast. He shivered violently, teeth chattering together, creating clicking sounds. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said, his voice more serious. "Now you'll learn the most important lesson: how to survive in a world not made for humans." They walked down the corridor, and with each step, the warm firelight behind grew more distant. Gareth felt like he was slowly sinking into a frozen ocean. where every breath could be his last. He began to understand why Marcus said the first night would determine his fate. The sleeping quarters assigned to Gareth were on the second floor, at the end of a long, dark corridor. Marcus pushed the heavy wooden door, and the creaking sound echoed in the frightening silence. Inside, the light from the small candle Marcus carried was barely enough to illuminate a small space around them. "This will be your home," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the empty room. "At least until you learn to adapt." Gareth looked around and felt his heart pound with fear. The room was as large as a small house, with a ceiling that soared up and disappeared into darkness. The bare stone walls had no decoration whatsoever, only damp stains running down like tears. In the center of the room was a large wooden bed, but it looked lonely and small in this vast space. "Why is the room so large?" Gareth asked, his voice trembling. "Because it was designed to show authority," Marcus replied. "The architects who built this fortress thought large rooms meant power. They didn't think about heating." Gareth approached the bed and touched the straw mattress. It was hard as stone and cold as ice. "How can I sleep on this?" "Hold on." Marcus chuckled. "I haven't taught you all the secrets yet." The old man walked to a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. "Inside here are the things you need to survive." He opened the chest, and Gareth saw it was packed with thick blankets. "Sheep's wool," Marcus said, pulling out a thick brown blanket. "This one's from Highland sheep. Their wool is thick as armor." He pulled out a second one. "Wolf fur. More expensive, but warmer." And finally, he pulled out the most luxurious-looking blanket. Bear hide, from a brown bear that the fortress hunters killed last autumn. Gareth touched the bear hide and was surprised by its softness. "Are they really warm?" If used correctly, Marcus began arranging the blankets on the bed in a specific order. Sheep's wool on the bottom, to absorb moisture. Wolf fur in the middle, to retain heat. Bear hide on top, to block wind. When Marcus finished spreading them, the bed looked like a small mountain. Gareth estimated there were at least 5 blankets stacked on top of each other. "But that's not all," Marcus said, his eyes twinkling in the candlelight. He went to another box and pulled out a set of long clothing. "Nightwear. You're not allowed to sleep naked here, unless you want to become an ice block by morning." Gareth took the long linen shirt. It was thick and heavy, completely different from the thin summer clothes he was used to. "One more thing," Marcus said, going to a corner of the room. There was a thick, dark blue curtain hanging from ceiling to floor, surrounding 3 sides of the bed. "Bed curtains. This is the most important secret." Marcus pulled the curtain closed, and immediately Gareth felt the air inside the curtain was slightly warmer. "It creates a smaller space," Marcus explained. "The warmth from your body will be trapped instead of escaping into the large room." "Does it work?" Gareth asked. "Enough to keep you from freezing to death," Marcus answered honestly. "But don't expect it to be as comfortable as your mother's house." By now, Gareth was beginning to feel tired and cold beyond endurance. He was shivering so violently he could barely speak. Can I sleep right now?" Marcus looked at him with worried eyes. "You don't look well. Change clothes right now." Quickly, Gareth hurriedly changed into the thick nightwear, his fingers trembling so much it was hard to button it. Marcus, meanwhile, left the room and returned with a metal basin with a long handle. "Hot cool pan," Marcus said, and Gareth could feel warmth radiating from it. "I'll warm the bed for you first." Marcus pushed the hot coal pan back and forth under the blankets. Warmth began to spread, and for the first time since entering the fortress, Gareth felt a glimmer of hope. "Jump in as soon as I pull the pan out," Marcus instructed. "Every second of warmth is precious." When Marcus pulled out the coal pan, Gareth immediately jumped onto the bed and pulled all the blankets tight. The warmth surrounded him like a gentle embrace. For the first time that evening, he stopped shivering. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Much better." Gareth sighed with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This warmth will only last about an hour. After that, you'll have to rely on your own body heat." Gareth felt worry returning. "What if I can't generate enough warmth?" Marcus was silent for a moment. "I'll give you one last piece of advice. If you feel too cold, don't try to endure it alone. Shout. Someone will hear and help. Pride can kill you here." "I understand." Marcus headed toward the door, but then turned back. "Oh, one more thing. If you hear knocking at night, don't be afraid. It might be someone who needs help. Knocking recruits sometimes can't bear the cold in their private rooms. They go looking for others to share warmth." Gareth understood the implicit meaning in Marcus's words. Share the bed. Life is more important than honor. "Boy," Marcus said seriously. "Remember that." With those words, Marcus left, leaving Gareth alone in the large, cold room. The sound of the old man's footsteps echoed in the corridor and then disappeared completely. Gareth lay silently in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the fortress at night. Wind howling through gaps, water dripping from ceiling to stone floor, mice running in the walls, and sometimes coughing sounds from the next room. The warmth from the coal pan began to fade, and Gareth felt the cold slowly creeping back. It started from his toes, then spread up his legs, then to his whole body. He curled up into a small ball, hugging his knees tight, trying to hold on to every bit of remaining warmth. He thought about the warm fire in the great hall, about the laughter of the guards, about the comfortable feeling of sitting near the flames. All of that now seemed as distant as a dream. He understood why Marcus said the first night would determine his fate. This wasn't just a physical challenge, but a mental one too. Hours passed slowly. Gareth didn't know if he could sleep, because the cold kept him painfully awake. Each time he was about to drift into sleep, a shivering fit would wake him up. He began to understand Bram's words. Most recruits can't sleep on their first night. Suddenly, there was gentle knocking at the door. Gareth started, his heart pounding. Someone was outside his room. He thought of Marcus's words. "If you hear knocking at night, don't be afraid." "Someone there," Gareth called, his voice trembling. "I'm Elena." A gentle female voice replied. "I'm a maid in the room next door. I heard you." Having difficulty, Gareth hesitated. He didn't know who Elena was, but her voice sounded caring and sincere. "Would you like me to come in and help?" Elena asked further. "I know the first night is always difficult." Gareth thought of Marcus's advice. Life is more important than honor. He could barely feel his toes anymore. "Come in," he said. The door opened, and dim light from the candle Elena carried shone into the room. She was a girl about 20 years old, with brown hair tied neatly, wearing a thick cloak. Her face was kind, but her eyes showed concern. "You look terrible," she said frankly. "I can see you're shivering. I don't know what to do." Gareth admitted, "It's so cold." Elena set the candle down and approached the bed. "I'll show you some tricks Marcus might have forgotten." She pulled back the bed curtain and checked how Gareth had arranged the blankets. "Oh, you've made a mistake." "What mistake?" "You put the bear hide on top. It will slide down during the night." Elena began rearranging. "Bear hide goes in the middle. Wolf fur on top. That way, the weight will press the layers together tightly." She worked quickly and expertly. Gareth watched each movement, trying to memorize it. "There's more," Elena said, pulling out a pair of thick wool socks from her cloak pocket. Sleep socks. Cold feet will make your whole body cold. Thank you, Gareth said sincerely. Not done yet. Elena went to a corner of the room and pulled a small rug near the bed. When you wake up at night, and you certainly will wake up, don't put your feet directly on the cold stone. Use this rug. Elena also taught Gareth how to curl up in a C shape to retain heat best. How to breathe steadily to create warmth in the small space inside the bed curtain. And most importantly, how not to panic when feeling cold. Cold will come and go, she said. Don't fight it. Accept it and find ways to adapt. Why are you helping me? Gareth asked. We don't even know each other. Elena smiled sadly. Because I remember my first night here. I almost didn't survive. Luckily, there was a kind guard who helped me. Just like I'm helping you now. Who was that, Marcus? Elena replied. He seems harsh, but actually has a kind heart. He saved my life. When Elena prepared to leave, she stopped at the door. Gareth, if you really can't bear it, knock on the wall. I'll hear you. Thank you. Elena, I'll remember. After Elena left, Gareth felt more confident. He followed her instructions exactly, curled up in a C shape, breathed steadily, and tried to relax. Warmth began to accumulate around his body. And for the first time that night, he felt he might be able to sleep. But then he heard a strange sound. From the next room came violent shivering. As if someone was in danger. Gareth sat up. Listening, the sound grew stronger, then turned into weak cries. Without hesitation, Gareth jumped out of bed, ran in socks out to the corridor. The cold attacked him immediately like a punch. But he ignored it. He knocked on the door of the next room. Does someone need help? The crying stopped. Then there was a weak voice. Someone there. I'm not well. Gareth pushed the door and entered. In the dim light, he saw a young guard curled up on the bed, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. The man's face was pale green, lips purple. Cold, the person whispered. Too cold. Gareth recognized this was an emergency situation. He ran back to his room to get a wolf fur blanket and returned. My name is Gareth. I'll help you. He wrapped the guard in the blanket and sat beside him, using his own body to transfer warmth. Gradually, the shivering began to subside. Thank you, the guard whispered. I thought I would die. It's okay. You're fine now. They sat silently for a few minutes, sharing warmth. Gareth realized this was the important lesson Marcus had tried to teach him in this fortress. Survival depended on people supporting each other. I'm William, the guard said when he had calmed down. This is my first night too. Mine too. Gareth smiled. Seems we're in the same situation. Would you like to share the room? William asked shyly. 2 people can keep warm better than 1. Gareth didn't need to think. Of course. They decided to sleep in Gareth's room because it had better bed curtains. When both of them curled up in the small space inside the curtain, sharing body warmth, Gareth felt warm for the first time since arriving at the fortress. Thank you, William whispered in the darkness. You saved my life. We saved each other's lives, Gareth replied. In the silence of the dark night, when cold was still lurking outside the bed curtains, 2 new friends found safety in companionship. This wasn't comfort, but survival. But it was the beginning of a friendship that would help them overcome the challenges ahead. When the first dawn light crept through the window crack, Gareth and William woke up, still alive and still warm. They had survived the first night, the first test in their new life at Ravenshollow Fortress. The wake-up bell rang from the watchtower, signaling a new day beginning. But for Gareth and William, it wasn't just a new day, but the start of their journey, learning to survive in this frozen world. That morning, when they entered the great hall for breakfast, Marcus saw them and smiled. "I see you boys have learned the first lesson." "What lesson?" Gareth asked. "That in this fortress, no one can survive alone." Marcus replied, "And that's just the beginning of what you need to learn." Gareth looked around the great hall, seeing familiar faces from the night before. Bram nodded in greeting. Elena smiled from a nearby table. Everyone shared one thing they had learned to survive in this world. "So, what's the next lesson?" William asked. Marcus chuckled hoarsely. "You'll know soon enough. Winter is long, and this fortress has many secrets to discover." When Gareth sat down near the warm fire, he felt a change in himself. He was no longer the frightened boy of last night. He had gone through the first test and survived. He had learned that strength doesn't come from enduring alone, but from trusting and supporting each other. But he also understood this was just the beginning. Winter at Raven's Hollow was long, and each night would bring new challenges. However, with William beside him, with guidance from Marcus and Elena, and with the warmth of this community, Gareth believed he could overcome everything. The fire in the hearth blazed strongly, as if welcoming new members to the fortress family. And in that firelight, Gareth saw not just warmth but also hope, hope for the days to come, for companionship, and for the strength of humans when united against adversity. The first week at Raven's Hollow passed like a series of survival lessons. Each morning, Gareth and William woke with their first task being to check if they still had feeling in their fingers and toes. Each evening, they prepared for a new night like warriors preparing for battle. But it was on the 8th night that Gareth's life changed once again when Marcus appeared at his door with something unexpected. "Would you like to meet a new ally?" Marcus asked, his eyes twinkling. Behind him was a large wolf-dog hybrid, black as night with white spots around its eyes. The animal looked at Gareth with intelligent, cautious golden eyes. "His name is Shadow," Marcus said. "This wolf-dog hybrid was brought back from the northern forest by a hunter. We plan to train him as a guard dog. But—" He paused, looking at the animal with curious eyes. "He has a special talent." "What talent?" Gareth asked, still hesitant before this large animal. "Finding warmth." Marcus smiled. "Shadow can sense the warmest places in the fortress. He's a living compass for finding heat." Shadow approached Gareth, sniffing him carefully. Then, suddenly, the wolf-dog lay down and pressed against his legs. Warmth from the animal's body transmitted through his clothes and surprised Gareth. "He's chosen you," Marcus said, with some surprise in his voice. "This rarely happens." "Chosen me for what? To be survival partners. Shadow understands that you and he need each other to get through this winter." Gareth looked down at the wolf-dog lying by his feet. Its fur was thick and warm, and he could feel the powerful body temperature radiating from it. For the first time since arriving here, he felt his feet weren't cold. "You can trust him," Marcus continued. "These wolf-dog hybrids are more loyal than any human. And in this fortress, loyalty can save your life." That night, when Gareth and William prepared for sleep, Shadow jumped onto the bed without being invited. The wolf-dog curled up at the foot of the bed, creating a living heater of warmth. "Strange," William said, looking at Shadow. "I've never seen an animal so intelligent." In the middle of the night, a sudden snowstorm attacked the fortress. Wind howled like the wails of ghosts, and snow lashed in through every gap. The temperature dropped to dangerous levels. Gareth woke because of the cold. Despite having all the warm blankets, he saw William shivering beside him, teeth chattering together, creating clicking sounds. Even Shadow whimpered from the cold. "We need to do something," Gareth said, his breath forming white clouds. Like this, we won't make it through the night. Shadow suddenly stood up and went toward the door, turning back to look at them as if trying to say something. He wants us to follow him, William said. They put on their cloaks and followed Shadow. The wolf dog led them through dark corridors, downstairs, then stopped before a small wooden door Gareth had never noticed. Shadow barked softly and scratched at the door. "Where is this?" Gareth asked. William pushed the door, and they entered a small room filled with warmth. This was the fortress bakery, where the ovens still retained heat from the day. The temperature here was higher than anywhere they had ever seen in the fortress. "Shadow's so smart." William sighed with relief. How did he know this place? They spread blankets on the floor near the ovens and curled up there. Shadow lay between them, forming a warm mass. For the first time since arriving at Raven's Hollow, Gareth slept soundly without being awakened by the cold. The next morning, the footsteps woke them. Dr. Aldrich, an old man with a long white beard, stood at the door with surprised eyes. "How did you boys find this place?" he asked. "Shadow led us here," Gareth replied. Aldrich looked at the wolf dog with respect. "I've been studying this animal since it arrived here. It has a special ability. It can sense heat currents in the air." "Heat currents?" William asked. "Warmth moves along invisible paths," Aldrich explained. "Shadow can follow these currents to find the warmest places. He's like a living thermal compass." From then on, Shadow became an inseparable part of Gareth's life. The wolf dog not only provided warmth but also guided them to safe places in the fortress. He knew which rooms had hearths with remaining heat, knew which corridors avoided drafts, knew when the fire in the great hall was about to go out. But more importantly, Shadow taught Gareth a valuable lesson: trust. In this cold world, trusting someone, acts, whether human or animal, was an act of courage. And from that trust, true friendship was born. One evening, while they were sitting in the bakery, which had become their secret base, William suddenly said, "Do you think we'll get used to this life?" Gareth petted Shadow, the wolf dog lying with his head resting on his thigh. "I don't think we'll get used to it, but I think we'll become stronger." "How do you know?" "Because we're no longer the scared boys of the first night. We have Shadow, we have each other, and most importantly, we know how to survive." Shadow lifted his head and looked at Gareth with intelligent golden eyes, as if understanding every word. Then the wolf dog placed his paw on Gareth's hand, a gesture showing agreement and friendship. That night, when all three curled up in the warmth of the bakery, Gareth felt something had changed in his heart. He was no longer just focused on survival, but began thinking about thriving. He began dreaming of ways to make this fortress warmer, safer for everyone. But those dreams would soon be tested when real winter began, and Gareth would have to face much greater challenges than just keeping himself warm. In the dancing firelight of the bakery, 3 companions, 2 humans, and 1 wolf dog, 2 here, had found not just warmth but also the meaning of friendship and courage. And that would be the foundation for the greater challenges waiting ahead. The second month at Raven's Hollow brought a cruel reality: winter, never intended to be gentle with anyone. Gareth, William, and Shadow had found their own rhythm of life. But around them, other guards were still struggling to survive each night. On a particularly cold morning, when everyone's breath created thick fog, Marcus gathered all the guards in the great hall. The old man's face was more serious than usual. "The situation is becoming serious," he began speaking, his voice echoing in the vast space. "We've run out of wood reserves. If we don't find a solution, the heating fires won't be able to last long enough to get through winter." Worried whispers spread throughout the great hall. Everyone understood what this meant. No fire meant death. Can we cut trees from the nearby forest? Bram asked. That forest belongs to Duke Blackwood's territory. Marcus shook his head. If we cut trees without permission, that would be an act of war. So what do we do? Another guard asked, his voice trembling. Marcus was silent for a moment, then said, we'll have to learn to live with less fire. That means sharing more. Cooperating more. Share how Elena asked. From tonight, no one sleeps alone anymore. Marcus declared. Everyone will sleep in groups in large rooms. We'll maintain 1 or 2 hearths instead of many small ones. Sounds of discussion arose. Many people seemed unhappy with this decision. I don't want to share a room with strangers. A guard named Harold objected. I need privacy. Privacy is a luxury we can't afford. Marcus replied firmly. You can choose privacy and death. Or life and community. Gareth stood up. Over the past month, he had gained everyone's respect for his adaptability and helping others. I support Marcus's proposal. William and I have shared a room since the first night, and we're still living well. That's different, Harold argued back. You boys chose to do that. Now we're being forced. Forced by the cold, not by anyone else, William said, standing next to his friend. If we don't unite, we'll freeze to death. The argument continued. But ultimately, cruel reality won out. No one wanted to die from cold, even if it meant sacrificing privacy. That night, the Great Hall was rearranged into a large dormitory. Mattresses were pulled from private rooms and arranged in long rows. Curtains were hung to create small compartments, each for 3 to 4 people. Gareth, William, and Shadow were placed in a compartment with Elena and a young guard named Thomas. At first, everything seemed strange and inconvenient. I'm not used to sleeping with so many people, Thomas admitted. He was only 18, a farmer's son sent to the fortress to learn fighting skills. No one is used to it, Elena said gently. But you'll see, it has its own benefits. Indeed. When night fell and the fires in the Great Hall were reduced to just 2 small hearths, the warmth from many bodies created a much more comfortable atmosphere than sleeping alone in a cold room. Hey, Thomas whispered in the darkness. I can hear everyone's heartbeat. It's like music. Gareth listened and realized Thomas was right. The steady breathing and heartbeats of 5 people created a gentle symphony of life. Shadow lay in the middle, his warm breath mingling with human breath. This is magical, Elena whispered. I've never felt so warm in this fortress. The following days, this new arrangement created unexpected changes. Initially, people worried about losing privacy, but gradually they discovered other benefits. When we sleep close together like this, someone will always be awake to tend the fire, Bram said one morning. Last night, when the fire was about to go out, I woke up and added wood without anyone reminding me. And when someone has nightmares, we can comfort them immediately. Thomas added, the night before last, I woke up worried, but hearing everyone breathing steadily beside me helped me calm down. However, not everyone adapted well. Harold still complained and tried to find distant corners to sleep alone. One night, Gareth woke up and saw Harold had left the communal area, returning to his private room. He'll freeze to death. William worried. Should we go check? Thomas asked. Shadow suddenly stood up. His ears perked as if hearing something. The wolf dog growled softly and turned toward the door leading to the private room area. Shadow senses something, Gareth said, sitting up. I think we should go look. The whole group went together, with Shadow leading. The wolf dog led them through dark corridors to Harold's room. When they knocked on the door, there was no answer. Harold Gareth called. Are you all right? Still silence. William pushed the door, and they entered the room cold as death. Harold was curled up on the bed, shaking uncontrollably, his face blue-green. Quickly, Elena ordered, "Bring him back to the Great Hall now." They carried Harold back to the communal area, placed him near the hearth, and wrapped him in every blanket they could find. Shadow lay close to Harold, using his warm body to transfer heat. I'm sorry," Harold whispered when he had calmed down. "Thought I could manage on my own." "No one can manage alone here," Gareth said gently. "We need each other." This incident marked a turning point. From then on, no one opposed communal sleeping. In fact, they began developing other forms of cooperation. Bram proposed a night watch system. Each person would stay awake for an hour to tend the fire and check on everyone's condition. Thomas invented storytelling games to help people relax before sleep. Elena organized sharing hot food at night. "We're becoming a family," Elena said one evening when everyone was gathered by the fire. "A family born from necessity, but still a family." Gareth looked around and saw she was right. The faces in the firelight were no longer frightened strangers. They were companions. People ready to share warmth, food, and even worries. But the greatest challenge hadn't yet arrived. On a night at the end of the month, when snow fell thick outside and wind howled like the wails of ghosts, terrible news came to them. Marcus entered the great hall, his face pale. "I just received a report from the guard. A group of people is approaching the fortress in the snowstorm. Among them are children and elderly." "Who are they?" Bram asked. "Villagers from the south. Their village burned down, and they're looking for shelter." "How many people?" Elena asked. Marcus swallowed hard. 25 people, including 5 children under 10 and 3 elderly. Heavy sighs echoed throughout the great hall. Everyone understood the problem. They were already struggling to keep themselves warm. How could they care for 25 more people? "We can't refuse them," Thomas said, his voice trembling. "They'll die in the snowstorm. But if we take them in, we might not have enough food and wood to get through winter." Harold objected. "So what do we do?" another guard asked. Gareth stood up. Over the past 2 months, he had changed greatly. He was no longer the frightened boy, but a confident young man trusted by everyone. "We'll take them in," he said, his voice steady, "and we'll find a way for everyone to survive." "How?" Harold asked. "By doing what we've learned: sharing, cooperating, and trusting each other." William stood up beside his friend. "Gareth is right. We've proven that when united, we can overcome any challenge." Elena also stood up. "I support this. We can't let children die from cold while we can save them." One by one, the guards stood up, showing support. Finally, even Harold nodded in agreement. "All right," Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with pride. "We'll open our doors to welcome them. But this means we'll have to tighten our belts even more." That night became the longest and most difficult since Gareth arrived at Ravenshollow. When the village group arrived, they were in terrible condition, clothes soaked, skin blue-green from cold, and eyes full of fear. "Welcome to Ravenshollow," Gareth said, his voice warm despite shivering from cold. "We'll take care of you." Arranging 25 more people in the Great Hall was an enormous challenge. Every blanket, every warm corner was utilized. Fires were lit bigger than ever, consuming wood reserves at an alarming rate. "We can't maintain this consumption level," Marcus whispered to Gareth. "The wood will be gone in a week." "A week is enough time to find a solution," Gareth replied, though he was also worried inside. Among the refugees was an old woman named Meredith and a 10-year-old boy named Little Thomas. Both were in particularly dangerous condition because their bodies couldn't fight the cold. "We must place them closest to the fire," Elena said, especially the boy. Little Thomas shivered in his mother's arms. Lips purple. Eyes dimming from cold. Gareth looked at the boy and saw himself on the first night here. Shadow. Gareth called the wolf dog. Come here. Shadow immediately understood his master's intention. The wolf dog lay down beside little Thomas, using his warm body to wrap around the boy. Gradually, color began returning to little Thomas's face. Old Meredith was more difficult. The old woman was weak, unable to generate enough body heat. William and Elena took turns sitting beside her, sharing their warmth. Why are you doing this for an old woman like me? Meredith asked, her voice trembling. Because in this fortress, we don't abandon anyone. Elena replied, You've lived long enough to see many winters. We need your wisdom to get through this winter. Indeed. Meredith knew many survival secrets that even Marcus didn't know. She taught them how to make soup from bones to create the most calories. She showed how to use straw and dry grass to create additional insulation layers. Most importantly, she told stories that helped people forget the cold. Stories are the best medicine against snow and frost. She said, when the mind travels far, the body feels less pain. The following nights, Meredith told stories about the harsh winters she had experienced, about people who survived through courage and unity. Her storytelling voice was like a lullaby, helping everyone sleep better despite difficult circumstances. But the wood shortage problem became increasingly serious. By the 5th day, Marcus had to make a worrying announcement. We only have enough wood for 2 more nights. What do we do after that? A refugee asked, a voice full of fear. Gareth looked around at the worried faces. Children, elderly, young people, all were looking to him for hope. He felt the responsibility heavy as a mountain on his shoulders. We'll find a way, he said, though he didn't yet know what that way would be. That night, when everyone was asleep, Gareth, William, and Elena sat by the dying fire, trying to think of solutions. We can't ask for wood from Duke Blackwood, William said. He hates Raven's Hollow. Is there another way? Elena asked. Gareth was silent, looking into the flames. Suddenly, he remembered something. Shadow always finds warm places we don't know about. Maybe there are other secrets in this fortress. What secrets I don't know. But this fortress has existed for hundreds of years. Surely the people who built it thought about heating. William's eyes lit up. Do you think there might be secret passages or hidden rooms? There's only one way to find out. Gareth stood up. Shadow, come here. We have work to do. The 3 people and 1 wolf dog began exploring parts of the fortress they had never visited. Shadow led the way, using his special ability to search for hidden heat currents. They went through dark corridors, down old stone stairs, into rooms that had been abandoned for long, and finally, in the deepest basement of the fortress. Shadow stopped before a stone wall that looked identical to all the other walls. But the wolf dog scratched at the wall and growled, as if there was something important behind it. Is there something special here? Elena asked, touching the wall. Gareth also touched it and felt a small difference. The air here was slightly warmer. There's warmth from behind the wall, he said excitedly. There must be something here. They began checking each stone, looking for a mechanism to open it. Finally, William found a stone that could be pressed in. When pressed down, there was the sound of old machinery working, and part of the wall slowly rotated open. Behind it was a small room with a wonder, a natural hot spring bubbling, radiating pleasant warmth. A hot spring, Elena gasped in amazement. How did we not know about this? Maybe only those who built the fortress knew. Gareth said, his eyes lighting with excitement. This is a natural heat source. It could warm the entire fortress if we knew how to use it. William examined the room more carefully and discovered an old stone pipe system. Look at this. There are pipes leading from this spring throughout the fortress. It's an ancient central heating system. But why isn't it working? Elena asked. Gareth studied the system and realized the problem. These pipes are blocked. Maybe after years of non-use. They've been clogged with mud and debris. Can we unblock them? William asked. We have to try. The next 3 days, while the fortress was experiencing terrible cold nights with wood nearly gone, Gareth, William, and Elena worked tirelessly to restore the ancient heating system. They had to scrape away centuries of mud accumulated in the pipes. They had to repair cracked sections. They had to figure out how the system worked without any instructions. Marcus and others helped by bringing tools and materials. Even old Meredith contributed with her wisdom. I remember my grandfather once told me about fortresses with dragon's breath. Maybe he was talking about systems like this. Shadow also helped by pointing out places in the pipe system that still had warmth, helping them identify which sections were important to repair first. On the last night before running out of wood, when everyone was shivering and worried, Gareth performed the final test. He opened the main valve of the hot spring system. At first, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the sound of water flowing began echoing in the walls. The ancient stone pipes began vibrating slightly. And then, the miracle happened. Warmth began radiating from the pipes in the walls. The air in the great hall gradually warmed up. The water droplets condensing on the stone walls began to dry. It works, little Thomas shouted, his face glowing with joy. We did it. Elena hugged Gareth tight. In the following hours, the entire fortress was warmed by the ancient system. For the first time since construction, Ravenshollow became a real home. Not just a cold fortress. People no longer had to crowd near the fire. Children could run and play without worrying about cold. The elderly could sleep soundly without shivering. You saved us, Marcus said to Gareth, his eyes wet with tears. Not just physically, but spiritually. You turned this fortress into a home. But Gareth shook his head. Not just me alone. We did this together. William found the opening mechanism. Elena discovered the pipe system. Shadow showed the way. Marcus provided tools. Meredith gave wisdom. Even little Thomas helped carry water to wash the pipes. That's exactly the point, Elena said, smiling. We learned that no one can do everything alone. But when we work together, we can do impossible things. That night, for the first time since arriving at Ravenshollow, Gareth slept truly comfortably. He didn't need to worry about keeping warm. Didn't need to watch the fire. Didn't need to shiver until morning. But more importantly, he slept with the awareness that he had become part of something greater than himself. He was no longer the frightened boy of the first night. He had become a leader, a protector, an important member of this community. Shadow lay beside him, no longer needed for warmth but still there because of friendship. William and Elena slept nearby. Not out of necessity, but because of the bonds that had formed. And throughout the fortress, from little Thomas to old Meredith, from Marcus to the newly arrived refugees, everyone slept in warmth. Not just warmth from the hot spring, but warmth from human affection, from unity, from the awareness that they belonged somewhere. Winter was still long, snow still falling outside, wind still howling. But inside Ravenshollow, people had found something more precious than physical warmth. They had found community, friendship, and the meaning of belonging to each other. When the first light of spring crept through the window, illuminating a fortress not just warm but filled with laughter and hope, Gareth knew they had achieved the impossible. They had turned a cold fortress into a real home. And in that warm light, with Shadow beside him and friends around him, Gareth smiled. He had learned the most important lesson in this frozen world. Humans are the warmest and most eternal flame. And when those flames come together, they can light up and warm an entire world. 3 months after the ancient heating system was restored, life at Ravenshollow had completely changed. The fortress was no longer a place where people had to struggle to survive each night, but had become a thriving community. Gareth stood on the highest watchtower, looking down at the courtyard full of children's laughter as they ran and played. Little Thomas, now with healthy rosy cheeks, was teaching other children how to care for Shadow. Old Meredith sat in the warm spring sunshine, telling stories to a group of eager young listeners. Hard to believe, just a few months ago, we were afraid of freezing to death, William said, stepping up beside his friend. Seems like a lifetime ago. Gareth agreed. But do you remember? We once thought just surviving was enough. And now Gareth smiled, looking down at the happy faces in the courtyard. Now we know survival is just the beginning. Prosperity is the real goal. Elena appeared from the stairway, carrying a notebook. She had been appointed by Marcus to manage the fortress's daily activities. There's news from the merchants, she said, her eyes lighting up. They want to establish trade routes through Ravenshollow. They say the reputation of a warm and hospitable fortress has spread throughout the region. Really, William was surprised. Are we already famous? News about us saving refugees and rediscovering the ancient heating system has spread far? Elena explained. People call Ravenshollow the Fortress of Compassion. Gareth felt warmth in his heart. Not from the heating system, but from pride. Maybe Marcus should know about this. They found Marcus in the Great Hall, where he was teaching a group of young people how to make nutritious soup. His face was much more radiant than in Gareth's early days there. Marcus, Elena called. We have good news. After hearing about the trade proposal, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That's a good opportunity. But we need to prepare carefully. Success can bring new challenges. What challenges? Gareth asked. When reputation spreads far, many people will want to come here. Some with good intentions. Some might not. Marcus replied. We need to ensure the community spirit isn't lost as the fortress develops. Marcus's words proved prophetic. In the following weeks, Ravenshollow began receiving more visitors than ever. Merchants, craftsmen, scholars, and curious people all wanted to see the fortress's miracle. Initially, everyone was excited. Income from tourism helped improve living conditions. They could buy better food, warmer clothes, and more modern tools. But then problems began to appear. One day, Gareth discovered a group of merchants trying to convince some guards to leave the fortress to work for them at higher wages. Why do you boys want to stay in this place? One merchant said. With survival skills like that, you could earn much more money in the big city. Because this is our home, Bram replied. But Gareth could see hesitation in his eyes. Another problem was some visitors showing lack of respect. They treated fortress residents like exhibition objects, taking photos without permission and demanding performances of survival skills. They want us to act like we're still freezing to death. Thomas complained to Gareth. They're disappointed when they see us living comfortably. But the biggest challenge came when Lady Catherine, the fortress's owner, returned from a long journey. Lady Catherine was an elegant but cold middle-aged woman. She had been absent throughout the winter, attending social events in the capital, leaving Marcus to manage the fortress. When she returned and saw the changes, her first reaction wasn't joy. Who gave you permission to alter my fortress's structure? She asked Marcus, in a tense meeting in the Great Hall. My lady, We only restored the old system. Marcus replied carefully. And who gave you permission to accept refugees without asking me? They would have died if we didn't help. My lady. Lady Catherine looked around the great hall, where dozens of people, both original residents and refugees, were living harmoniously. I see my fortress has become a refugee camp, she said, her voice full of contempt. And I hear there's a guard named Gareth who has appointed himself leader. Gareth stood up, his heart pounding but his voice steady. I never appointed myself leader. My lady, I only tried to help everyone survive. Survive? Lady Catherine laughed coldly. I see you're living quite comfortably. Perhaps too comfortably. She immediately ordered the heating system must be shut off to conserve energy. Refugees must pay rent or leave. And all important decisions must be approved by her. My lady cannot do this. Elena spoke up. These people have become our family. Family. Lady Catherine raised an eyebrow. I am the master here. You are servants. Don't confuse your positions. Tension in the fortress increased daily. Some people began leaving, unable to bear returning to miserable days. Others tried to resist but had no legal power. Gareth found himself in the middle of a conflict he never wanted to join. On one side was Lady Catherine with legal authority. On the other was the community he loved and wanted to protect. That night, in a secret meeting at the bakery, 2020, which had become a symbol of their unity, Marcus made a thoughtful proposal. There's one way, he said, his voice heavy. We could leave Ravenshollow and establish our own community. Leave. William was surprised. But this is our home. Home isn't a building, Meredith said gently. Home is where people love each other. But we've invested so much in this place. Thomas objected. The heating system, the improvements, the memories. Gareth listened silently to the debate. Shadow lay by his feet, as if sensing his master's tension. There's another way, he finally said, but it requires us to be braver. What way? Elena asked. We'll prove to Lady Catherine that our community has value not just morally but practically. How Gareth looked into the flames, thinking about what they had gone through together. By showing her what we can do when facing real challenges. A few days later, news came that a large bandit army was advancing toward this area, attacking small fortresses and pillaging. Duke Blackwood had sent calls for help to neighboring lords, including Lady Catherine. I will lock the gates and wait for them to pass. Lady Catherine declared, Ravenshollow can withstand a siege. But Gareth knew this was exactly the opportunity they had been waiting for. My lady, he said in the council meeting, I have another proposal. I'm not interested in your opinion, but my lady should be interested in the fortress's interests. Gareth continued, despite her angry glare. If we just lock doors and hide, we'll be seen as cowards. But if we help Duke Blackwood defeat the bandits, the fortress's reputation will rise. You want me to risk my soldiers' lives for reputation. I want my lady to see that a united community can do impossible things. Lady Catherine laughed mockingly. You think your farmers and refugees can fight bandits? I think people who have learned to survive in harsh conditions will know how to protect what's important to them. Finally, Lady Catherine agreed to let Gareth try, with the condition that if he failed, he and his supporters must leave the fortress forever. Gareth gathered everyone who could fight, not many, only about 30 people. But they had advantages the bandits didn't. They understood the terrain. They had motivation to protect their home. And most importantly, they had learned to work as a team. We can't beat them with strength, Gareth told his team. But we can win with intelligence and coordination. They spent 3 days preparing. Elena organized communication systems using smoke signals and mirrors. William designed traps in the forest. Thomas and others prepared medical supplies and food. Even Shadow was trained to perform reconnaissance missions. When the bandits arrived, they expected a direct attack on the fortress. Instead, they encountered a series of small, coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Gareth and his team didn't try to defeat the entire bandit force. Instead, they disrupted the enemy's plans, destroyed supply sources, and created chaos. "What are they doing?" the bandit leader roared when he saw his group being attacked from all sides. "They're everywhere." The truth was, they weren't everywhere. But they moved quickly and coordinated so well they created that illusion. Shadow was particularly useful in tracking bandit movements and reporting back to Gareth through a signal system Elena had developed. After 3 days of non-stop fighting, the bandits decided the area was too dangerous and retreated. They had lost too many people and supplies without gaining anything. When news of victory spread, not only Lady Catherine, but also Duke Blackwood and other lords had to acknowledge Gareth's talent and the strength of the Ravenshollow community. "I was wrong in my assessment," Lady Catherine said in a meeting after the victory. For the first time, her voice had some humility. "You proved that community can be stronger than I thought." "Not I proved, my lady," Gareth replied. "We proved it together." From then on, life at Ravenshollow changed once again, but in a more positive direction. Lady Catherine learned to listen to the community's opinions before making decisions. The heating system was restored, and refugees were officially recognized as residents. The fortress became a small but prosperous trading center. But most importantly, it became a symbol of what could be achieved when people united and trusted each other. 1 year after Gareth first set foot in Ravenshollow, he stood again on the highest watchtower. But this time, he wasn't standing alone to escape the cold. He stood there to admire the community he had helped build. In the courtyard below, children ran and played in warm sunlight. Adults worked, laughed, and shared stories. Old Meredith still told stories, but now her tales included a chapter about the miracle winter when community was born. Shadow lay sunbathing nearby, no longer needed for warmth but still a symbol of loyal friendship. William and Elena climbed the watchtower, as had become their daily routine. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. "About turning down the job offer in the capital with high pay," Gareth smiled. "I once thought strength came from being able to survive alone. But now I know real strength comes from belonging to a community." "And are you afraid of the coming winter?" William asked. Gareth looked toward the horizon, where the first autumn clouds were gathering. "No, because this time, we'll face it together." In the evening light, the three friends stood silently, each thinking about the journey they had traveled. From nights shivering with cold to days filled with hope. From just trying to survive to building a meaningful life. "Do you know what I treasure most about our story?" Gareth said. What both friends asked at once: that it's not finished. Every day, we write another page. When the first stars began twinkling in the sky, they went down to the great hall together, where the community was gathering for dinner. No longer crowding near the fire to find warmth, but gathering to share joy and plans for the future. Shadow followed, tail wagging happily, and in the warm light of the great hall, amid the laughter and stories of people who had become family, Gareth understood they had found something more precious than survival. They had found the meaning of belonging to each other. Winter would come again, as it had for thousands of years. But at Ravenshollow, cold nights were no longer enemies to fear. They were opportunities for the community to bond even more closely, for stories to be told, for friendships to be nurtured, and for everyone to remember that in this frozen world, humans are the warmest and most immortal flame of all. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.